everyone. This is Anne from Read It Again Books. And today I have with me Kristy Woodson Harvey. Hi. Kristy's books have received accolades such as Southern Living's most anticipated beach read, as well as US Weekly's Sweet Reads for right now. And today she's here to discuss her newest release called Feels Like Falling. Hi, Kristy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I'm so thrilled that you were able to join us in this type of environment.
I know. Well, this has been so great, especially since I'm not able to be on a real book tour this year, to be able to come here and see everybody. And it makes it feel like a real book tour. It's wonderful.
Well, and that's one thing that I wanted to ask you is, what state are you in presently?
So I actually live in North Carolina. So I'm in North Carolina right now, and I live on the coast. So it's been kind of an interesting time because normally, all the spring breakers would be down, and but our beaches have been closed, of course, and things are sort of starting to open back up. We've been really fortunate here that we haven't had too many cases, but as summer comes, that everyone starts coming down. We don't know how it'll go, but we've been in our house for 6 weeks and really hungered down, and looking forward to getting back out again when it's safe to do so.
So I know that all of your book tours have been canceled and postponed and whatnot. Do you see that when you do start making your tours again, are you liking this environment where we can chat like this, or do you like to be with all the people, or what?
I love to be with the people. I mean, I really do. I love to, get up in front of a group and speak and look at people when I sign their book and give them a hug and take a picture with them and all of those things. That really is something that I enjoy and I look forward to all year long. But if I'm being totally honest, I usually go on a 6-week book tour. So if I'm gone for, I'll be in 2 or 3 cities a day. I'm on an airplane pretty much every day. I'm lugging my luggage all over the place. And so that, of course, is harder than sitting in my living room and talking to people. But I've been so surprised at how connected I have felt to my readers doing all these events and being able to just still see people and still say, hey, this is a great bookstore. Please support them and, buy your book from them. That's been incredible. And I think if I hadn't done this, I would have been so sad. But to be able to have all these great online events, I just feel very connected and like I'm on book tour like normal, kind of.
Yeah, I actually watched a video that you did. I think it was a day or so ago, and everybody, it was very relaxed and the questions were just coming towards you and you were just, answering them like it was, you were all just kind of sitting around chatting.
It was so fun. Yeah. So, and I will say, I mean, I do think that's one of my favorite parts of doing real events is, those questions with your hand in the air. So I'm always excited to just see what people want to hear about and what they're talking about. And now, so the book came out last Tuesday. And so now a lot of people have read it. So when I'm doing these events, sometimes people will actually be on asking questions live, and it's very fun to get to answer them like that.
Well, while we're talking about questions, if anybody out there has a question, please comment, and we'll ask Kristy to answer it, or we'll post it so that we can get your answer for her. So let's dive into the book. I have to say that this weekend I took the book outside, told my family to leave me alone, and I wanted to read the book because I really got into this book. And so tell us about the book.
Okay. Well, so it Feels Like Falling is about Gray and Diana, who are 2 women from very different worlds who meet when they're both just having a really bad day and sort of in the midst of a really bad year. And so on a day when Gray could really use a little good karma and Diana could use a little good luck, instead, Gray inadvertently gets Diana fired from her job. So this is not the best way for these 2 people to meet, but it does end up sort of thrusting them together. And they end up forming this sort of odd couple, an unlikely friendship. But they really do help each other sort of, pick themselves back up and move into what I call in the book, happily ever after, the sequel.
Yes, I loved both of the characters. I connected, I think, with Diana, and I loved the friendship between the two of them. When you were writing, was one character a little easier to develop than the other?
Well, I mean, easier probably. I would say Gray was probably a little bit easier for me, simply because I was, writing this character who, her job is similar to something that I do. She is a blogger, and she sort of parlayed this blog that she has into a business. And so I was, really able to kind of write about what she did pretty easily and sort of put myself in that position. Now, I haven't gone through, I fortunately have not lost my mother or am going through a divorce or any of those things. But, it kind of helped inform me, I feel like, about, who she was and the kind of person she was and how important her company was to her, because she had built it, from the time she was 20 years old on her own. That said, Diana is, I think, my favorite character I've ever written. I love Diana. I feel like she is strong and she's smart, and she's been through just unthinkable tragedies in her life, but she just moves forward. And I think, when Gray and Diana meet, Gray kind of needs someone to take care of her. And Diana's not even much older than Gray, but she's very maternal and she's very caring. And so she kind of comes in and sort of fills this void in Gray's life, while at the same time, Gray and Wagner, who is Gray's 8-year-old son, really they love Diana. They just love her. And I think they really help her be able to come into a space where she can trust people again and where she can let someone love her, which is fortunate timing because she doesn't know it. But the one that got away is about to come back, and she needs to be ready for that. So I really do. I love her, and I love, the struggles that she's been through and how they've made her strong, but still vulnerable.
Yeah, I one word that I think describes Diana is sassy.
She is sassy.
It seems like she has a comment or a suggestion for Gray at any time. And I really like Diana. If there's one life lesson that when your readers are reading this book, what do you want them to take away from this book? Like one life lesson to be learned?
The title of this book comes from this one line. Can I say hi to people? Hi, Glenn.
Yes,
I just saw Dorothy. Hi, Dorothy. This is so fun to get to see people popping up on the screen. I love it. So thank y'all for being here. But the title of this book comes from a line that is, sometimes when you're speeding through thin air, the brakes worn out and the engine shot, it might feel like you're falling. But in reality, that's when you're learning to fly. And when I was writing this book, I had no idea that it was going to be coming out in the midst of coronavirus. I had no idea that it was going to be coming out when we were all going to be taking a really hard look at where do we go from here, and like, how do we reinvent ourselves, and what does life look like after this? What is that going to be like for everyone, and how are we going to kind of pick ourselves back up? And so, but I feel like it's just such interesting timing that it would come out now, because I really do feel like I want people to take away from this story that, second chances exist and we can find them, and just maybe to look for people in our lives that can help us on that journey, because none of us need to be in it alone. It's so much easier when we have other people to rely on. And I do feel like, Gray and Diana kind of find each other out of these difficult circumstances. And they also have a lot of other people in their lives, a lot of other, friends and family members that maybe they come to rely on in a little bit of a different way. And I think it's such an important part of the story, and it's an important part of all of our lives.
Oh, absolutely. And I had marked here, I have my little sticky notes.
Oh, I love them. That's so
And one of the comments that sorry for looking down here.
Yeah,
the comment that you said, almost at the end of the book that says, maybe it feels like you're falling, but in reality, that's when you're learning to fly. That comment and sentence was awesome. Yeah, very much. And I want to read here. So I'm moving over here. I want to read some of these comments from other authors that we're getting about this book. And everybody needs to read this, like Elin Hilderbrand, next major voice in Southern fiction.
That was a good one.
Mary Kay Andrews, and I loved this. Buckle up, buttercups, because Kristy's book is the next summer sizzler. How does that's got to make you feel awesome.
Oh my gosh. Well, and it's so nerve wracking because these people are my heroes. I mean, I've been reading Mary Kay since I was a little girl, and now we're friends. We do a live show together every Wednesday.
And I wanted to ask you about that later.
Yeah. But even still, I mean, when I asked her for this blurb, it was probably a little over a year ago. And I knew her, I had met her. She'd always been very kind and generous to me, but to ask someone, who's so busy to read your little book and, cause you feel intimidated because, it is my 6th book, but she's written like 29 or, something amazing. And so it's so intimidating. It really, really is, but she could not have been more gracious. And she was like, of course I would love to read it. I can't wait. And she was just so kind, and then wrote me the loveliest words about this book. And then actually Elin was one of the first authors that I ever met when my first book came out, because I was at the big book expo in New York. This is like one of the highlights of my life, really, when I'm sitting here telling the story. It's very glamorous. but Jennifer Weiner was having a party at like this penthouse in New York, and she invited me, which was really nice. And I walked in the door, and the first person I met was Elin. And I, introduced myself, and I said, I'm a big fan. And I said, my first novel just came out, and she said, well, I want to read it. And I was like, oh no, you can't, no, I can't let Elin Hilderbrand read my little book. But she did. And that was my first book. And then she ended up, writing a blurb for me later on. So that's one of the big surprises for me about being an author, is how kind and generous authors have been to me and are to each other, and how they sort of, welcome you into the fold. And so I've been very cognizant of that. When people need me, I'm always trying to sort of help them, because it's a big, brave new world out there, and you don't really know what you're doing unless you have someone to sort of guide you. So to have, my heroes, Mary Alice Monroe and Patty Callahan Henry, and these people who I have looked up to for so long are, I would count as good friends now, which is just, it blows my mind. It really does.
Let's kind of talk about that, because it's if I remember, it's called Franzen Fiction, and it's on Wednesday nights at 7:00, right?
7:00, yeah. And we actually have a Franzen Fiction Facebook group, but these first few weeks we've been streaming live from Mary Kay Andrews' author page. But it was just this random idea. So Kristen Harmel is another really good friend, and she writes these beautiful historical novels. And Mary Kay just sent a text out and said, to the however many of us, she was like, hey, let's jump on Zoom and have a glass of wine. And we were like, oh, fun, let's do. So we got on Zoom, and we were all chit-chatting, and we had a glass of wine, and someone, I think it might've been Kristen, said, we should do this and like let our readers be here too, and like come in and ask questions. And we were like, yeah, let's do it. And it was one of those things that someone just had to take the initiative to be like, okay, we're going to do this, and it's going to be really fun. And we were just going to do it, through the quarantine, but it's been so great that we're going to keep doing it.
Oh, absolutely. I remember tuning in, and I think Mary Kay's daughter was helping her get herself set up.
No, and it's totally real. It's like Katie's in the background, like, okay, guys, you got to answer some of these questions. Quit talking. It's very real. Like, kids can be walking through the background. You just don't know what's going to happen. So we're, but it's just fun to get to just talk about, what we're working on and what we're reading. And, I got to sort of celebrate my launch last week. I was the host that week. And so, and then this week, Mary Kay has a book coming out, so she'll be hosting it. Thank you, Glenn. I'm glad.
I was just going to say, Glenn just said she loves it. Wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Stephanie. Thank you. Franzen Fiction nights are fun.
That's great that people, and clearly I love watching it, but it's nice to see all these comments of people that are clearly watching alongside me. on Wednesdays. That's just great.
Well, and I actually had this, it was my first, we obviously cannot have real book signings, but I did like just a tiny little like fundraising event for our historic site down here. And we just did, people had books shipped, or they could come out to the curb in their car and, we would pass them a book through the window. And one of the ladies that came was like, oh, I'm watching every Wednesday. And I have all my friends all over the place watching with me. And then we talk about it. And it's a great way to feel connected to readers when you're not out on the road seeing them face to face. It's been really nice.
Yeah. And I love that all of you always have a comment. I mean, just to be talking about stuff constantly, it's so much fun. It's like I'm sitting there with a glass of wine with all of you.
That's so great. Well, that's what we were hoping for. So I'm so glad to hear you say that, because it's been fun.
So let's talk about you and writing your books, because you haven't, as you said, haven't been writing that awfully long. Did you know that you always wanted to write, or how did you get started?
So I really didn't. I mean, I've always been a super avid reader from the time I was really little, and before I could read was making, someone read to me all the time. So I've always loved books, and I used to have little notebooks that I would carry around and write little stories. And so it's definitely always been something that I've really enjoyed doing, but I never really thought about doing it for a career. And then when I was a senior in high school, I got an internship at my local newspaper, the Salisbury Post in Salisbury, North Carolina. It's a great little newspaper. And I learned everything I know from them. So that was great. But I was writing these like silly articles I wrote the Garden Games series. And my first article was about a giant squash that looked like Elvis Presley. I mean, these are not, the topics that Pulitzers are made of. But I really learned that everybody has a story, and that everybody, has something to tell, and something that, they can really contribute to the world. And that was just a huge lesson for me as, a teenager. And so I actually ended up going to journalism school. I was originally planning on majoring in biology and going to medical school. So this was a humongous switch for me. But I loved journalism school. It was so great. And then I got a master's in literature after that, and then graduated and went to work in finance, of all the crazy things. But I was living in a little town, and there just weren't really writing jobs available. And so I thought, I'm just going to do something different for a little while and see what happens. And about a year in, I would be, driving around the state now, calling on clients, and I would just be having all these ideas. And I knew from my creative writing classes, they were story ideas, but I had also said I would never write a novel. And so I was a little bit hesitant at first, but then there was this one that just would not let me go. And I remember kind of thinking, you know what, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to do this. And I'm very type A. So I'm actually a little bit surprised that I ever did this, because I never expected to get published. I never expected to be an author. I didn't even really think that I could finish a novel, so it was certainly like a leap of faith for me to sit down and really even do this to begin with. But I did. And I wrote this first manuscript, and I enjoyed it so much. And I just was captivated by the way that the characters kind of came to life on the page, and the way that the story would just take over in a way that I never would have expected. And so that was really exciting. And so by the time I was finished with the first one, I was already working on a second. And then the same when I was finishing the second, I was already working on a third. And that was about the time that I thought, you know what, this might be something. And so I decided to try to find a literary agent, which happened actually pretty quickly. I was very, very surprised by that, and very fortunate to have just sort of found the right person pretty early on. But he was over here trying to sell this manuscript. And in the meantime, I finished Dear Carolina, which was actually a sequel to the book that the agent was trying to sell. So Dear Carolina won a writing contest, and an editor at Penguin Random House was one of the final round judges, and she ended up buying Dear Carolina out of that contest. So it was kind of a magical beginning, really. And so I wrote Dear Carolina and Lies and Other Acts of Love. I actually wrote Feels Like Falling after that, but in the meantime had an editor call and ask me to write a series for her. And so I wrote the Peachtree Bluff series, and then totally rewrote Feels Like Falling 3 years later. And here we are. It's out now. So
Oh, it's such a great book. So you talk about the Peachtree Bluff series. Do you see doing another series, or are you liking these standalone books?
To be honest, more than myself, I've been kind of thinking about my readers. I have some reader every single day. I get at least one, if not many, many more messages from people saying, please write more Peachtree Bluff. So I do think people would like another book in that particular series, certainly. And I am, strongly considering that. And the series has actually been optioned for a TV show. So I'm hoping that might work out.
Well, because that was one question that I had is, rumor has it that Peachtree Bluff is maybe coming to Hulu or Netflix?
Well, we aren't that far down the road yet. We still have to sell it, but writers have been hired, and some talent is kind of, in there. So it's the farthest that I've ever gotten on, a project like this, which makes me really excited. It's very, very hard to get these things made. And certainly in this climate right now, it's everything's kind of on pause, but it's just been exciting and just fun to go through the process and to think about, what would this be like, and to talk to these amazing writers who have these great ideas about, adapting this series, for TV. So if that happens, I think it would probably be more likely that we would see more Peachtree Bluff. I do have another idea for a series, but as of right now, my 2021 book, Under the Southern Sky, is a standalone. And my 2022 book is also a standalone. It was originally going to be a book and a sequel, but I'm going a little bit of a different way with it. So it's just going to be a standalone, I think, because it's going to have a historical storyline that doesn't really lend itself very well to a sequel. So, thank you, Sandy. Hi. I'm glad you love the Peachtree series. But I do have an idea for another series, and I think it will be in the works sometime. It's kind of in the back of my mind. It's so funny because I always have a lot of different stories kind of running around in my head. And so, sometimes one just captures me more than another one. And so the next few that I'm working on are just sort of what are taking center stage for me. But I think I'd love to write another series. It was a great exercise for me. It pushed me out of my comfort zone. And, but I also am aware that not everyone loves a series. And there are a lot of people that don't like series and they only want to read standalone novels. So I guess I'm writing for them right now, and then I'll go back to writing for my series lovers in a couple of years.
Can you tell us a little bit about the books that you're writing on?
Yeah, absolutely. So Under the Southern Sky, I actually just worked on the back cover copy for it today, so it's sort of fresh in my mind. But it's a little bit different than my other books because there are 3 female protagonists, but there's also a male protagonist, and he's my first male protagonist. It was very nerve-wracking. My husband's had to go over it and over and over it because I want to make sure that, I get it right. But in the story, his wife has passed away 3 years earlier, and a childhood friend of his is working on sort of an investigative piece for, she's a journalist, and so she's working on an investigative piece for a magazine. And she does a little digging that she's not supposed to do. And she realizes that the embryos that he and his deceased wife have frozen are slated to be destroyed. And, evidently they aren't able to get in touch with him or something like that. So she sort of inserts herself into the middle of this story. And he has to make a decision about, what he's going to do with these embryos that are the last remaining piece of this woman that he loved so much. So the 4 protagonists in this story all have a secret, and none of their secrets relate to the embryos, but they all end up being a major deciding factor in what ultimately happens to them. So
that sounds wonderful. And it sounds like it's a little bit of change from what I consider to be a beach read, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's, it's interesting because I think some of my books, the way that you would describe them or talk about them, they don't necessarily sound like beach reads. And I think this is a little bit of a, it's a little bit more serious than some of the other things I've written, but it also has a lot of those same elements. I mean, it has this really idyllic, charming beach setting. And it's, there are some really funny moments in this book. There are some really funny relationships between characters, especially some, mother-daughter dynamics and some, some Southern meddling mothers and things like that. So there's a lot in the story that I think could still qualify it as a beach read, but it's definitely, it's a step more serious than some of the other things I've written.
When you write a book, what kind of research, or do you even do any research for your books? Do you have to travel to areas where you think the setting is going to take place, or how do you kind of do that?
Yeah, and it's so terrible, and it's so hard to have to go to all these beautiful beaches so I can write about them. It's a real sacrifice, but I do it. But certainly for the Peachtree Bluff series, my editor actually wanted me to write a series set in Georgia, and so I based the town off of Beaufort, where I live right now. But, I did have to go to the Georgia coast. I had to go to the Georgia coast. It's so hard. And I had been there, several times before. So I had a good idea of, what I was writing about. But I wanted to make sure that while this quirky little town was based on Beaufort, that, geographically, what I was writing about made sense and that it was, the right thing. I didn't want people to pick up the book and be like, well, that is not Georgia, So yeah. And for Feels Like Falling, I think, Diana has a brother with special needs, and the four siblings have been split up in different foster care sort of situations since they were young. So I did have to do some research about, what would have happened to him 20 years ago, like where would he have gone, and what would the legality have been about that. And one of the things that she really wants is to be able to get him back. And for him to be home with her, and how would she go about doing that? So that really for this book was my major, point of research. And, and like she talks pretty specifically about, oh, thank you, Carol. She said she's loving Feels Like Falling. That's so nice. But pretty specifically had to know some, medications that he might be on, or therapies that he might be going through, or ways that she could ease transitions for him, things like that. And then for Under the Southern Sky, I actually am in the process right now. I have an attorney friend who does this for a living. And so she's sort of going through the finer points, making sure there's a lot of legality with frozen embryos. It's shocking the amount of legality that goes into these embryos and what would happen to them, in the event that one or both of the parents were deceased. And so those types of things for sure. And then the settings, and I'm working on my first historical. So this is a whole new world for me in terms of, really diving into research and trying to recreate, these women and their lives, and, what their lives would have been like. And then also, what their personalities were like, and trying to kind of capture that on the page. So that's definitely a whole new world for me. But, I went to journalism school, and my master's is actually in multicultural and transnational literature. So I've done a lot of research. So I feel prepared, but also, it's kind of like when I wrote Peachtree Bluff, and I thought, I don't know if I can write a series, but here we go. And I think that's sort of where I am now. I don't know that I can write historical fiction, but why not?
Right. And let's give it a try. and you have all of us that will clearly buy the book. So
well, thank you. And I will say, even though what I'm working on is historical, it's also contemporary. There's a contemporary storyline and a historical storyline. So you'll, readers that have come to kind of expect a certain thing out of my books, they will still get that thing that they like. So
that's good to hear. So what's your typical writing day like? Do you write every day, or when a thought comes to you, do you scribble it down, or?
Yeah. Well, so every day is a little bit different, honestly. And I feel like my life is kind of in a little bit of a cycle. So right now, I would have been on book tour, and even though I'm not physically gone, the online book tour has been very stringent. I mean, and, there's a lot of, there are a lot of events. There's a lot of interviews going on, and I've done this has been kind of fun. I've done some TV stuff that's like, being recorded at home. And then, so that's kind of opened up a lot of doors to be able to, be on TV in a lot of different places and not even have to go anywhere. So there's a lot going on with that. I would not be writing right now. There's no way. But right before this, I was editing the 2021 book. And then right after this, I will start writing my 2022 book. So when I am in a writing cycle, I'm usually that's the first thing I do in the morning. I try to take my son to school, go work out, and then come home and write just for 90 minutes. It's not that long, but I've gotten to the point that I can sort of I try to write about 2,000 words a day, and I can usually get that in. I'm not saying it's beautiful, but I can usually do it. And there's just a lot of other things going on. I have an interior design blog, and there's a lot of, publicity and marketing that's sort of always happening. And I do about 80 speaking engagements a year. So I'm traveling a lot. So I try to just kind of, write in little chunks when I can. But a lot of days when I'm drafting, I'll do like maybe 2 90-minute sessions, but I write every single day when I'm drafting, 7 days a week. If it's my birthday, if it doesn't matter, like I am in that draft. And then after that, I spend, weeks editing and then turn it into my editor. So
you mentioned your blog, and tell everyone about Design Chic.
Okay. So Design Chic is my interior design blog that I have with my mom, Beth, and we started it 10 years ago almost. It's crazy. I think it was like May 21st or something, 2010. And we thought we were going to do it for a couple of months, and we never thought anyone would read it or see it or subscribe or any of those things. And 10 years later, we are still here, and it's just turned into this great thing. So I'm very excited about that. Oh, thank you, Michelle. That's so nice. But I'm so excited that we're still here, that we're still doing it. We're actually starting a new segment on Tuesdays on the blog called Blank to Beautiful. And so we're sort of branching out a little bit because we're going to be interviewing not only designers, but also writers and artists and other creatives about, their journey from taking something blank and turning it into something beautiful. And it's been so interesting to talk to people about their creative process because it's so similar. It's so similar the way that, a writer gains inspiration and a designer gains inspiration. And so just seeing the intersections of those things has been really interesting. And it's been great for me just to have this sort of community, even before I sort of had a reader book community, to just have a community of people online that I felt like were sort of behind me and supporting me when I went out to, take this big new career move.
Yeah, I've been reading about it, and working with your mom. That's got to be great to, just collaborate with her and spend time together and that sort of thing. Only a couple more questions because I know that you have another situation. Let me see if I can do this right. Okay, here is the book cover, and I absolutely love it. And as you publish more books, how do you differentiate the covers so that they stay true to the common theme, if you will?
Yeah, I have to give so much credit to the cover designers at Simon & Schuster. They are amazing. And it kind of varies from book to book. Feels Like Falling. My editor would email me every few days when it was sort of time that we were supposed to be looking at covers. And it was earlier this year because we were trying to get early copies out, like very early, much earlier than usual. And she would email me and she would say, I have some covers, but they're not it. They're not it. They're not it. And of course, this was our 4th cover together. So she knows what I'm going to love, I think. And so, one day she said, I think this is it. What do you think? We can do something else. And I opened it up and it took my breath away. I was like, this is it. Feels like falling, down to the bracelets that Gray wears on her arm every day. I was like, this is the cover. I love it. It captures the setting. It captures this kind of feeling that I think, the book has of sort of, I don't know that loneliness is the right word, but kind of moving ahead in a different direction on your own and sort of what that feels like. So the minute I saw it, I thought that's the cover. And I think I said, can you change the color of the hat band and the bathing suit top? And that was it. And that doesn't happen all that often. But they do such a good job. And for Southern Side of Paradise, we had such a hard time because there were so many stunning covers choices for that book that I was like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't even know. But then weirdly, we all ended up choosing the same one, which I always think that's a good sign, when everybody can Oh, thank you, Glenn. She loves the cover too.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of amazing when everyone sort of feels that, oh, you love my, I love my name, Carolina Blue on the line too. And I'm real, so Carolina Blue is great. Oh, you're getting yours from DG's. That's awesome. Thank you, Gina. That's our little, we have a little local gift shop. Oh, thank you, Dallas. I love Dallas. I think it's my best cover too. I totally agree. It captured this so well.
I have one final question, and it's a doozy. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What are you doing for Mother's Day?
So I'm actually really excited because I have not seen my parents. We all went skiing together very early March. And when we came home, it was before everybody was kind of on lockdown, but we didn't want to be around people because all that had sort of started. So we haven't seen them since very early March, and everything's opening back up here, I think on the 8th. So, I mean, we're not going to be going anywhere, but we've all been in quarantine for weeks. So they're going to come here, and I'm actually going to get to see them. So I'm so excited because I haven't seen them in such a long time. And yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to celebrate with my family, and I mean, hopefully they're just going to shower me with amazing gifts, I would expect, right?
You so deserve it.
You know.
You just came out with a new bestseller book. I mean,
and I'm having to homeschool. I mean, this is really, if this was ever a year for a good gift, this is the year.
Is your husband anywhere?
Can you hear me, Will?
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I will let you go. I just wanted to let everybody know that you have sent us some nameplates, because obviously you can't come to Atlanta to do something in person, and support your independent bookstores. Read It Again, all the ones that are close by you, because times are hard right now.
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming that, oh, thanks, Connie. That's nice. She said I have a good laugh. It's probably pretty annoying, but I appreciate that. That was nice of you to say. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much for hosting me. And I'm sure you ship books, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Read It Again can ship you a book with a signed book plate from, anywhere that you are. And we say it on Franzen Fiction. I say it every day on social media, but please do support your local bookstores because they're so important to our communities. Our communities will not be as rich without them. And we need them to be around. So if you can, it's great to support them.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I loved the book. And good luck with your other two that are upcoming. I look very forward to it, especially this historical fiction. That's going to be a nice switch.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me, and you've just been so nice and so generous. So I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you. And if you make it to Atlanta, we welcome you anytime. Just give Kim a call, and we will certainly work around your schedule so that you can come in person. We would love to have you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Be well.
Thank you.